Hi everyone, welcome to Weeko Convos with Dan. I'm really excited to bring you this next one. Stuart Andrews is a bit of a pioneer. Well, his whole family is actually. They run a farm up here called Forage Farms. They're doing all sorts of things, but they're mainly producing eggs from chickens, and so free-range chickens as well. They're also doing the pork too. Now, there's a bit more to it than that. They're doing this thing called natural sequence farming. It's a thing that Stuart's father developed a number of years ago. His father, Peter Andrews, has been on Australian Story and whatnot as well. It was a fascinating chat. Stuart can be a little bit brash at times, but I'll tell you what, the guy is passionate. There's no denying that. It was a really, really interesting chat. I hope you enjoy. Have a listen. Welcome to Eco Convos with Dan. I'm your host Dan Vanderhook, and we are here live in the Century 21 Platinum Agents office in Gympie. We are talking about all things regeneration, self-sustainability and off-grid living. My guest today is Stuart Andrews, so son of the infamous Peter Andrews from a number of Australian Story episodes and whatnot, and Stuart himself is now farming up here in the Gympie region and working on Forage Farms. So Stuart, welcome on to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Mate, it's a real absolute pleasure to have you along, and I'm really excited for you to be here for the conversation tonight. Mate, you've got a lot of information for us to try and digest, and I think one of the big things that we wanted to talk to you, obviously, is along the lines of natural sequence farming, which is something that you've been practicing over there in the Murray Valley, in the Bylong.
Certainly, yep.
About how long have you been there now, mate?
We've owned the property for 5 years, and we've been up here for just over 4.
Okay, no worries. And so you come from down south, and you want to tell us a little bit about where all this started. Why are you doing what you're doing now?
Well, that's a big story.
We've got time, it's right.
I don't think you have. But yeah, look, it started in the Bylong Valley in New South Wales, which is in the central tablelands near a little place called Mudgee.
Yeah.
So it started there with my dad, Peter Andrews. We had a horse property, and that's where he was doing his research into what's now termed as natural sequence farming.
So he started racehorses, didn't he?
Racehorses, yeah. We had lots of racehorses, and they were probably some of his little trial and his tests on seeing how they performed in the landscape. And so Tarwyn Park was his little trial place where he ran his horses, and so I grew up working with him on that property. That's where I was, I guess I learnt some of my trade.
Yep.
And after 40 years of living there, we ended up selling that property, and we moved to a property at Rylstone, which was about 70 kilometres away.
Yeah.
And that was, we purchased a property there that was highly degraded, and principally because what we found is that I found in our training course that people were always asking, oh, well, so this works at Bylong, but it won't work here, or it won't work there.
Yeah. So
I bought 1 degraded, 2 steep, 3 clay.
Yeah.
All of these things that people said, oh, that's not what Tarwyn Park is, so what about that? So I bought one, so I could fix it up, so I could show people, how it improved over time, so they could be part of the journey as well. But at the same time, I always wanted to develop or have a multi-species farm.
Yeah. And
so it was more about, for me, in the headspace I was in at the time, more about having somebody that was in a similar headspace that would be maybe better at running something like that than me. So I found a person that I believe that fitted that position.
Right. Yeah.
And they happened to be up here.
Okay.
And they were a bit further north than this, but they had a house at Mullaney.
Yeah. And
so we ended up coming up and looking for land, and we settled on this block here at Gympie. So that's how we sort of ended up in this part of the woods.
Okay. So is there, you just said about the idea of wanting to get a multi-species farm? Was there much thinking behind that? Because you often talk to people. I'm a cattle farmer, or I raise horses, or I'm a sheep farmer, or I'm growing crops. Was there a bit of a reason behind?
There was. And look, in the training that we do, we we tell people about having diversity. We must have biodiversity. If we don't have biodiversity, our landscape collapses.
Yes, that's animals and plants.
Everything. It's above the ground, below the ground, multi-layers above the ground. It's everywhere. We must have diversity. And so a lot of the farming operations that I see are very simplified. They may have sheep, they may have cattle,
Yep.
they may have both. They may have cattle and cropping or sheep and cropping, but that's about it.
Yeah.
There's not enough layers. And part of the problem with food production is that we need such large areas to produce the volume of food that way.
Yeah.
Where if we add multiple layers with one that enhances the other, then all of a sudden we can now produce far more food in the one environment with every species or every plant helping the other one.
Yes, it all works hand in hand together and gives you better volume. And
yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous that you keep hearing people talking about, we don't have enough land to produce food. No, we've got more than enough land. We just have to produce it better, and we have to understand how the landscape functions first and foremost. If we understand that, then we can do pretty much anything.
Okay, so I think that's probably great. Yeah, moving into the principles I know that the PA started off was that bringing what was back. So that's been obviously a big principle in what you guys have been doing as well, and controlling water too. Is that right? Managing water. Okay, so can you explain? How do you manage water?
Well, unfortunately, most of the rain that falls, or at least 60% of it today, runs off.
Yeah.
So it was originally managed by plants, and having all that diversity in there was how the plants managed to do it. But on the introduction of 500 different species of animals and so forth brought over when white man came to the country, that a lot of that vegetation, which evolved without those animals around, was eaten or damaged, whatever.
Yeah.
So we don't have that diversity of plants in here now to manage the water. And as a result, we've had severe erosion. So lots of gullies, lots of creeks in size, rivers, all those sorts of things. So now, and man-made drains, built just to get rid of water.
Yeah.
And it's a real problem now because you can get away with that when the landscape's functioning well and it has resilience because the rain events are regular enough and so forth. So, but now it's not like that. So our landscape's drying. So we have to now look at how do we get that water, the hydrology functioning in the landscape. So that's pretty much what we're talking about. How do we do that? But how do we do it economically? It can't cost a lot of money. If it costs a lot of money, then it's just not good.
Yeah. So it seems to make perfect sense. It seems to be such a simple solution, essentially, to what's been going on. Why haven't people been doing, operating like this? Why have they been, creating drains and pushing water away?
Well, it's a bit hard to tell, really. I guess the first thing, people didn't understand how this landscape functioned.
Yeah.
The Aboriginal people that were here prior to Europeans, they understood how this landscape functioned.
Yeah.
So they probably worked more passively in the landscape or in the environment than we did. And it's not really until PA started to be able to see these patterns and processes out in the landscape, pretty much probably the same as the Aboriginal people did, that there was any reason to start to look differently at it.
Yeah.
And so it's slow. Everybody is just very slow at learning, and it's frustrating. Sometimes it's about the delivery. Is the delivery in a way that the average person can understand?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably been part of it because PA is the main person out there delivering this information. Sometimes he can be a little bit confusing, even to me. So I guess I've learned from him how we can modify the language so that the average person can understand it. And I see that happening a lot more today.
Yeah, well, I think that's really encouraging. We were saying just before we started about the fact that you guys run a lot of training programs and whatnot through Tarwyn Park, and what you can actually
people learning to manage their properties better and learning to manage their properties possibly in a different way. There's so much of that. We've got these multi-generational farms. Granddad did it like this, dad did it like this, so I'm doing it like this, and it is all based on that that Eurocentric idea of farming. This is how it was done over there, so this is how it must be done over here, and it's just making such a massive difference to our landscape and severely degrading the land.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in Europe, you had a freeze and a thaw, which guaranteed water and fertility over a set period.
Yeah.
It also gave a time of rest, so the land got a chance to have a break. Australia doesn't get that. We get sunshine all year round, so it's constant go, 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 go. So that means we can't afford to be draining our landscape because we need to have that hydrology. We need to have the water in the soil to grow plants, to manage the sun energy that we get every day. Because we get, and up here in Queensland, even more so, there's so much more sunlight up here than as you travel down south. So we should be growing huge amounts of green surface area. The more, the better.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing is that you guys got a pretty interesting take on weeds. What people would be classing as weeds and classing as such a it's destroying my ground. It's not. I've got a paddock which has got thistles through it, or I've got all sorts of different grasses I don't want, so we rip them out. You guys have got a pretty different approach to that, right?
Yeah, we're not plant racist at all. Yeah. We believe that every plant plays a role. Now, like I said, the introduction of all these different animals into this landscape, it is completely ludicrous to think that we could introduce all those animals and us, humans, the humans that came here, we could introduce all of those without having the plants that evolved with those animals or the humans. So we need to have all these other plants. Yeah, so what? They might be weeds, but they all form a role, and they're vital in helping to rebuild this landscape back to what it was.
So is that working because you've got different root lengths and things like that through the weeds, or the grasses are different, or trees have got different levels through the soil? Is that part of the reason why you need to look at everything as a whole? Yeah,
well, you need to look at it as a whole and understand what every plant is doing. So you've got plants out there that are prickly.
Yeah.
Now, what they're armoured, and they're saying, keep away, I've got a job to do. So they're in there doing that. You've got coarse grasses around here. A big one is giant rat's tail. You constantly hear people going on about giant rat's tail. Look, it is a problem in such that it's not as palatable to livestock.
Yeah.
If you keep creating the conditions that it favours, you'll end up with a lot more giant rat's tail than you will other pasture. But it's just a symptom of how the land's being managed. That plant will come in, it will rectify whatever needs to be rectified, and then eventually it phases out and it gets replaced by something else. A real key thing to think about is that you tell me where in the world that plant has taken over. See, these are the comments I hear all the time. Oh, this plant's going to take over the world. Will you show me where?
Yeah.
Where in the world has that plant taken over?
Yeah.
And you can't find it because it just can't happen.
Yeah. So it's I think it's interesting in talking to people when they say, well, you've got this on your land at the moment, so it probably means there's a deficiency of some sort because that's how that's thriving. So if you then go through the process of these weeds break down, and they're actually going through introducing more nutrient into the ground as they're breaking down. So there is a vital part to play.
Oh, look, of course there is, and that's what we say. We talk about understand what the plant is doing. If you can now assist it or do its job, you no longer need to have it there.
Yeah.
So if you understand what it's doing first, then maybe you've got the right to remove it if that's what you feel you need to do. But you must understand what it's doing first, and then you must be able to do its job.
Well, I know there was I've seen a few of the videos and stuff that your father's been running and done over the years. And one of the things he was pointing out was, yes, we've got this thistle here, but below that there is so much green. Just below it, it's providing shade. It's giving a different level nutrient in the soil as well, which is now encouraging this grass to grow. And when it dies off, it'll take over.
Yeah, well, what happens is that because the thistle, we'll use thistle as an example, because it has a taproot, it has the ability to feed in a zone lower down than the grasses do.
Yep.
But the grasses, because they're thieves, they have the ability to go in and they'll put their roots in just below the surface, in and around the thistle. And when the thistle, because it's got so much green surface area, during photosynthesis, it's capturing carbon, it's pumping that into the ground as sugars.
Yep.
The grasses steal the sugars from the roots of the thistle. So they're protected because they're prickly, and so they limit the ability of animals to get in around them, or whatever the predator might be. And they're able to steal the sugars from the plant, which sets them up in a strong position. When the thistle finishes, all the nutrients it took to grow the thistle return back to the surface. So now you've got more to feed the grass, and you've created almost like a highway down through the soil with the taproot that worms start following up and down. So all of a sudden now you've got all this biology attached that was never there before the thistle grew. But people don't pay enough attention. If they go out when their thistle is growing well in the paddock and they lift the leaves up and remove a bit of soil, they'll find worm castings. I guarantee it's the only place there's worm castings in that entire paddock is underneath that thistle.
So it's vitally important not to be spraying it.
For more than one reason, other than poisoning the landscape and the environment and yourself, it is definitely. We must understand what these plants are doing, and if, as I said before, if we can do something to help them, then they will phase out a lot quicker.
So by really, looking at keeping things going the way they're meant to go, the way that nature intended for them to go, it's a much more productive way to do it. It's obviously cheaper because you're not having to, you're adding all these chemicals and whatnot to the area. It's a lot less labour intensive as well, I'm assuming.
Well, by the way, it's so much more labour intensive. It depends what you're wanting to do. If you're wanting to go out and mulch them, then maybe that is a little bit more labour intensive because you're going to mulch them or slash them down. But the thing is that it just takes so much chemical out of the system, and what we don't know is we don't know how far that chemical spreads. I've had this discussion many times with people about organic farming. So, okay, you're an organic farmer. How in the world could any of us actually be an organic farmer when our neighbour is using chemicals and wind goes over our land, water flows most of the time from one property to another, whether it's over the top or through the soil, either way it's moving. Biology moves all this stuff around. There's nowhere really that can be 100% chemical free today because we've done or destroyed it. But we can, if we start reducing the chemical or even cut it out completely, then we can start the soil organisms can start to manage it, bring it back into check.
I think I think you're 100% right in terms of how far things will travel. I was talking to another guest, and he was citing a study where something was actually left a property locally. So and actually when left through the Mary River, and they actually found trace elements of that exact product. I can't remember what it was in the Great Barrier Reef. So if something's going to travel that far, everything will.
Everything is linked. We seem to think that we can put a fence up around our portion of land and that everything stays within that. It is just ridiculous. It can't happen. But this whole landscape is a whole. So what affects one area will affect the other. It may be reduced in the other area compared to where if it's chemicals, where you're actually using that chemical. And the type of chemicals that we use, the type of chemicals we use on the likes of giant rat tail, there's no research into what other things that chemical's wiping out.
And the thing is, there's a lot of that sort of stuff. It's still not solving the rat tail problem.
No, it's only treating a symptom.
That's right.
Yeah.
So in terms of what you guys are offering to eat, so I want to talk about Forage Farms in a little bit, but first up, we mentioned Tarwyn Park a minute ago with the training. So you guys are running courses. Is that running a whole gamut of different areas, or are you focusing on one particular thing with people?
Yeah, so it's Tarwyn Park Training is the name of our organisation. We started that originally at Tarwyn Park, hence the name, and that was part of my journey. So I was learning about how do I run a course, because I'm a farmer, not an educator, and particularly not an adult educator, which can be a little bit more difficult because some adults are difficult.
Yep.
And so it was about my journey in learning how to do that. And so the comfort zone was a property that I knew, which was Tarwyn Park, and where we'd done all the work. So there were examples there.
Yeah.
When we sold that property, we started running our courses on another property called Maloon Creek, which is down near Braidwood, or Bungendore in New South Wales. And so that took me out of my familiar landscape and into an unfamiliar one. And so once again, this is part of my journey. So it's getting me along the way. It took me out of my comfort zone. I had to go to another landscape. And I'd already travelled around a bit, but still we ran our courses predominantly back at Tarwyn Park.
Yeah.
And so I got down there. We ran courses there for a couple of years, and now today we travel all around Australia. So it doesn't matter where we are. Last week I was at Manila, near Tamworth in New South Wales, running a course. The week before that I was in and around Esk. I did 3 field days there in 3 days.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't matter. The thing is that the landscape functions, the basic functions are the same wherever you go.
Yeah, so it's one of the key things I saw on the Australian Story, one of the Australian Story episodes was Malcolm Turnbull came on and said that what you guys were doing was in a specific area, and a specific, it's not necessarily going to work everywhere, but that's been completely debunked, hasn't it?
Yeah, I don't even know why he said that, because PA had been to his place in Scone.
Yeah.
And I think it's a safety net for those guys, because the moment they start saying, this will work, they got a commitment they got to keep to. So there's been politicians over the years show some form of interest and a little bit of commitment, and then they usually back out after a while. There's a lot of pressure coming from big business to not see this stuff get out there, because this is about improving landscapes and minimising what it costs a farmer to farm, and improving their profit.
Yeah.
Don't want that, do we?
Well, big business certainly doesn't.
No.
At the end of the day, if something doesn't make sense, follow the money and you'll find your answer.
Yeah, and so all we've got to do is keep banging away. Eventually big business will find out how they can make money out of this instead. That's how it works.
It'll work. So one of the things that I know was a bit of some of the issues that were in place previously have been, in the efforts of slowing water and whatnot, adding willows, putting the reeds back in, going through the blackberries, using those sorts of processes. There was a lot of resistance from governments and neighbours.
That hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed.
Still the same.
That was where the question was going.
Yeah.
Has things changed?
No, not really. No. You can't teach people anything. Really, it's pretty much the thing. Look, I'm not interested. I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not that interested in teaching people that don't want to know.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in working with people who want to change, who want to do something differently. And then the more people that we get doing that, the more they influence the doubters.
Yeah.
So there's no point banging your head up against a brick wall every day of the week. It doesn't make any sense. So I give all my time to people who want to be involved, who want to know.
For me,
and those who don't,
consumers
continue
and
on
the
doing whatever
farmers
they're doing.
are the leaders of the world. They just don't know it, And what my role is, I think, is to show them that they have all the power, and then they determine what the people supposedly in charge need to do.
Okay, so why do they have all the power?
Well, because they buy the food.
Yep.
And they vote. So by buying the food, that determines how the farmer produces it.
Yep.
And obviously by voting, the parties or the party or parties that want to be in power generally try to do things that the voters want or what they believe they want.
Yeah.
And so they have the power there as well.
Yeah.
But they just don't realise it. They don't realise that they hold all the power.
Yeah, it's such a massive difference between going and trying something that's been mass produced and supermarkets and whatnot, and what you're seeing there, to actually then going and getting something that's actually direct from the farm. And so you guys up here, you've got your diverse range of animals. What are you actually doing up here at Bylong at Forage Farms?
So we produce pastured eggs. So our chickens live permanently out in the paddock.
Yep.
In a rotation. Pastured meat birds, so meat chickens as well. Pigs.
Yeah.
Once again, everything's rotating out in the pasture, and sheep and cattle. So sheep for lambs, and the cattle we're not selling any beef at the moment. The cattle are there as tools.
Yeah.
We've been trialling the beef. We've just processed one for ourselves, and I wanted to make sure that the meat was a good enough quality for. If it was good enough for us, it'd be good enough for other people, and yeah, it's plenty good enough. But we'll one day we'll probably move into beef, but at the moment we're just going to keep sticking with all those other animals.
Yeah, listen. So you guys you sell directly from the farm, and you sell actually through over the internet and whatnot as well. So can you tell us a little bit about the actual process of when you've got the meat and how people can actually access it?
Yes, so there's various ways. So we do have some retail outlets in and around Gympie. There's a couple of outlets. There's Farmer and Son, and then where else was it? Where is there? There's one other place in Gympie, but it's just not coming to me right now.
I've sort of seen the eggs and whatnot through Shaw's Meats.
Shaw's, that's right. Yes, Thank you very much. Yep. So the eggs are at Shaw's. At Farmer and Son, you can get meat products and eggs, and by appointment you can come out to the farm and pick it up, and then you get to see how we operate.
Yeah, it's a pretty impressive operation. When we went out there a few weeks ago, it's a great little setup you've got.
It's dynamic. A nightmare is probably what you could probably refer it to as. But yeah, no, it is. It's very dynamic, and it's very busy. It employs a lot of people. There's a lot of that's the thing about farming these days. It's all about how we reduce the numbers of people. Anyway, we'll talk about getting off track. So you've got the meat boxes, which our son Hamish, he set all that up, so people can ring up online, they can order a meat box, and depending on where you live, it'll be delivered to your door. That makes it quite easy. Eggs, generally the eggs are sold in retail outlets. You can buy them from the farm. We're not actually delivering them as part of our delivery service at the moment, simply because it's being a fragile product. It's a bit hard to be putting it in a meat box, particularly with frozen meat and eggs. They don't go too well together. So, but we sell eggs all the way down to the Gold Coast. It's the furthest we go in IGAs, and we've just started supplying Harris Farm Markets, which is a reasonably big New South Wales franchise, and they've just opened one store up in Brisbane, and there are going to be more.
Yeah, mate, that's fantastic. So, you guys have been working extremely hard to actually, make that land that you got, productive.
Yeah. And it is now. It is super productive. We're about to go have some meeting with Young Farmers Connect group to see if we can engage a young farming couple who don't have any land of their own. That they want to start a business, but they can't afford to buy land. We want to grow veggies because we're lifting our fertility to the point now where we can certainly start producing, doing some horticulture, but we just don't have the time to do it ourselves. So I'd rather empower and engage somebody else who wants to run a business, and I mean they could then use the Forage Farms brand and market their veggies. Well, I mean, we've already got plenty of markets, so they could probably slide into there. So that's probably our next level. So
I think it's such an incredible thing to be inspiring others. I know that's something that you guys do daily. Seeing where things are headed, in the future. What are your thoughts? Do you think things are going to keep on going slowly, maybe inheriting some of these practices? Or what are your thoughts? I mean, I'm sure you hope things will be moving forward.
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, part of our vision from the start was that let's trial the model. Let's see if the model can work. So, we go through all the hard components, dealing with all of the ups and downs of running a business like this, and then we can help other people then create the same model. Yeah. My vision is that we can have multiples of these smaller farms, highly diversified farms, functioning around every town, every city around Australia, supplying food into those towns and cities. Now, not all of that food, you're not going to supply all of the town. That's just unrealistic because some people just probably can't afford to pay that little bit extra, yeah. and they will be still utilising the industrially produced food. But we can have these little hubs all around the town, every town around Australia, which means people have got options.
Yeah.
When they haven't got an option, well, they've only got one, haven't they? They can only go to the supermarket. And look, once the supermarkets realise, and they are, once they realise that this is what the consumer wants, guess what they'll be selling? They'll start to sell these products without a doubt. The only reason they sell, and I do get tired sometimes, I hear people, bashing the supermarkets and go, Coles and Woolies, they put all of this stuff out there and they only take just this bit of fruit, they won't take a straight banana, they'll only take a bent banana and it's got to be bent this amount. Now that's all right. That's exactly what they do, but they do it because that's what the consumer wants.
Because there's a market for it.
Well, because you've got to always go back to the start, like we do in the landscape. Go back and understand where all this started. How did it get to that point? It got to that point because the consumer left those unusually looking bits of fruit or vegetables behind, and so they're running a business. Coles and Woolworths are running a business. I don't like it, but this is what they do. They're running a business, so they go, okay, so we can't sell that product, we're throwing it away, so we'll put it back on the farmer and we won't accept anything like that. So, once again, they're driven by the consumer. The consumer has all the power.
Yeah.
The consumer leaves that there, that supermarket says, right, we're not going to buy that anymore. So you don't blame anyone, blame the consumer.
Yeah.
That's who's, first and foremost, they're the ones that are at fault.
I'm really encouraged at the moment by seeing the number of people who are starting to do things themselves. Starting their own veggie gardens, starting to actually see the difference between what they've created or what has been created, or grown, with that bit of care and attention. You're seeing a lot more people actually going through to the farmers markets. You're seeing a lot more people actually starting to see the value in actually what's being produced and being produced locally. I think that's probably one of the most exciting things that we're having at the moment, and I'm sure you see that as well. From people coming, the numbers coming to your courses, the numbers also coming through and doing tours at your farm.
Yeah, well, so I mean, our vision is to draw all of this together. So we've got our Tarwyn Park training program, and predominantly we're working with landscape managers of one sort. They might be one sort or another. They may be small acreage or 100, 200,000, million acres, whatever. So that's that part.
Yeah.
But those guys, there are restrictions or government restrictions that limit some of their ability to do things. One is the craziness to have to force people to deal with weeds. That's one thing. The other thing is limiting what you're allowed to do in your degraded flow lines to get them to work. That's all driven at a political level, right? So that's a hard one for farmers to overcome because it's limiting their ability to repair their landscape. But you've got the consumer at the other end who's got no idea what's going on for the farmer and the fact that the landscape's degrading. So with Forage Farms, we now educate the consumer about how farming can be conducted.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to do is to tie the two back together. If we tie the two back together, then the consumer and the farmer become the leaders. And guess what the power brokers do? The politicians. They follow. Because they're only followers, they're not leaders. They think they're leaders, but they're not. So they're followers. So they'll follow and they'll do what is then necessary to make all of that work.
Yeah.
So the consumer gets better quality food, and the farmer gets to do what needs to be done to improve their landscape and get assistance.
So for the farmers, what they can do is obviously come, have a bit of a chat and look at different opportunities for what they can do with their land. As consumers, what can we do to help support our farmers?
Buy right, understand how food is produced. Just Google it. I mean, if you're buying stuff in a packet, then stop, because if it's in a packet, it quite possibly isn't even produced in Australia.
Yeah.
Let alone the quality of it. So that's probably the first thing. And then, so the next thing is look at your fresh products. Where are they coming from?
Yeah.
And if you can, buy from a farm that you know. And even better if it's a farm you can visit.
Yeah.
Because then it engages you and you know how that food's been produced and you feel more confident. But at the very least, the first thing is make sure you're buying Australian.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And then the next level, so everybody can do that. Everybody can buy Australian. Even people that are wanting to or really can't afford to pay a little bit more for better quality food, they can at the very least buy Australian.
Yeah.
The next thing is to look to buy from the term now is regenerative. So from regenerative farms or farms that have got a big key component of looking after the landscape.
Yeah.
So they're the things that you can, because how you shop determines how farmers farm.
Yeah.
You shop where you're first of all encouraging Australian food. Well, guess what? Now you've got farmers that are going to be producing food for you rather than that going to an overseas market.
Yeah.
And the next thing is you may choose to pay a little bit more to buy it from a regenerative farm, and now you're encouraging farmers that may well be running a conventional operation today to shift over, because all of a sudden that's where they can make another dollar and improve their landscape at the same time.
I think there's also that extra level as well of your cafes and your restaurants, and now a lot of them are shopping local. You're seeing you're going to somewhere and you're saying, well, this is I went and got a sandwich the other day and had ham from your farm. And that was one of the things that they were pointing out. The bread was made locally, everything was made locally, and that's such a wonderful thing as well. And as a consumer, there's a level of pride there as well, and saying I am actually helping out the local blokes.
Yeah, that's right. And look, it is a lot slower in the food industry, I've got to say.
Yeah.
A little bit frustrating at times. Generally they're probably the biggest, well, some of the biggest problems with utilising cheap food.
Yeah.
It defies belief that we've had cafes that would say to us, no, but we can't afford to use your eggs. I said, hold on, they're 5 cents per egg dearer than the eggs you're buying now and produced in a way better fashion.
Yeah.
And you can't afford to buy. No, can't afford it. It's like, come on, that's just a cop out.
But you can pass that cost on to the consumer, onto your customer anyway.
Of course you
can. Because
your
customer's going to say, well, this is excellent. I mean, I'm able to support, again, through the fund. This is an advertising option for the restaurant, for the cafe.
Yeah, it's the hardest part of our business is getting the cafes and restaurants. We've got some that will promote the fact that they use our product. I've been banging on about this for so long now at some of our cafes. Why don't you guys realise this is what the consumer wants to know about, especially in some of the better places that we, the more upmarket places we supply. The consumers that are going there are paying a good price for their meal, and they're good meals. They are the ones that want to know, and all of a sudden it will change the whole outlook of their business. Anyway,
Hopefully slowly they're coming around, maybe.
They are, but it's driven by the consumer again, because the consumer needs to learn to walk in there and go, where are your eggs from?
Where's this from? That's
right. Okay, they're from an industrial caged farm. I'll see you. I'm out. Go somewhere else. That's what then pushes that.
Yeah.
But the consumer needs to know to ask it.
Yeah. Well, it's all a learning experience.
It is.
And that's the thing. I think hopefully people are starting to make that move, and I'm confident they are. just in the conversations I certainly have.
Yeah, me too. I think so as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Mate, look, I really appreciate your time here with us tonight. So I think we're getting to the point where we'll start probably going through our 6 in 60. So 6 questions in 60 seconds. We've got to try and knock through them pretty quickly. But mate, you ready to go?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Give it a shot. Okay. So number 1, what's a personal habit of yours that contributes to your success?
Hard work.
Excellent. Best advice you've ever received?
Honesty. Always be honest.
Yeah. What's the one thing that you're most fired up about today? This is a bit of a loaded question.
What I'm fired up about lots of things. Fired up about our landscapes and improving our landscapes and encouraging consumers to shop better.
If you could recommend one book or podcast to our listeners, what would it be and why?
Well, I'd have to say Back from the Brink, written by my dad, Peter Andrews.
It's not just a plug too, that's a great book.
No, it's a great book. It's a book that everybody can understand. It's in good plain language, which he doesn't normally speak. So, yeah, it's a really good book.
Okay. So, what next 12 months, what are the personal goals that you guys have got?
Just to be able to distribute the information that we have across a broader audience.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, no worries. Now, mystery question. If you could pick any roommate, which one would it be? Would it be a pig or a chicken?
It'd be a pig.
Why is that?
Because it has a degree of intelligence greater than a chicken.
That's excellent. Mate, look, thank you so much for coming on. Mate, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to talk about today at all? You wanted a bit more about your business at all?
I think you've done a great job, Dan. I think we've covered enough. The people have got a fairly good insight into what it is we do. If they want to know more, they can just ring us or send an email, and we're more than happy to fill them in.
Mate, so we'll obviously have all links to the book by your man as well, but also to Forage Farms, Tarwyn Park training. We're going to have all the links and everything available in our show notes and in all the details on our webpage and all the various social channels. And so Stuart, mate, thank you so much. Really appreciate having you on. It was a really good chat, and I think people are going to pick up a lot from it. So mate, thank you again to everybody. Good evening. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Cheers.
See ya.
Wow, what a chat. Stuart is an absolute legend and he knows everything about his industry. Make sure you follow him and his family at Forage Farms, and make sure you also give us a like, share and subscribe on all the social networks and where you get your podcasts from.